Okay, so guys, Silicon Valley. I want to talk about that at some point. We don't have to start with that. We could start with the Arbitrum drop. Other side, Trip 2, for those who don't know, and then like there's airdrops out the wazoo. Where do you guys want to start, man? What is hot on your radar?
I mean, let's start with Silicon Valley Bank. I mean, I think that's just a good starting point. Um, and
But
then let's explore the madness that is
did
crypto
you
right
cover
now.
that in decentralized news?
No, I haven't talked about the fact that they're reopening. I because
So,
there were so
okay.
many other things to talk about this week.
Yeah, crypto years. So, short story is that I did my show on Monday, yesterday morning, and somehow it came across my radar that Silicon Valley Bank and its 17 branches was open again, and its branches are in obviously California, but also in Massachusetts. I didn't realize that. And they reopened both web services for deposits and withdrawals for normal banking under new management. And I was at the gym and I was thinking about this. And so we saw a major capital influx into crypto, and it's been relatively stable. We jumped from about 16 and a half, 17,000 Bitcoin, and it jumped to 27,000. And it's kind of stabled, but it's kind of gotten a little wobbly. So it's kind of dipped under 27,000. I'm projecting that as these banks reopen and we realize we're not in a banking crisis as bad as they thought we would be, or maybe they did their job and prevented one. You be the judge. That's not my call there. But I think from a capital flight perspective, we will see capital actually exit back out of crypto into TradFi. So that's kind of what I'm calling for right now. Um, yeah, any thoughts on that whatsoever? I'm going to drop the link in here on LinkedIn so everyone has it to
Austin,
the
you
I
wanna take a shot
FDIC.
at this?
I mean, I think that's possible. Um, I'm not convinced that we're gonna see a huge capital flight because I think anyone that moved their money into crypto probably isn't going to be so quick to also just move their money back into the bank. I think that's something that we've gotta kinda take into consideration. Someone that was gonna make such a quick decision and a solid move like that probably might be hesitant to change back.
I don't know, like, Jared, I mean, what do you think here? Because, well, first off, let's shout at our peeps. So Vicky is a new friend and follower. We've been talking a lot on Twitter, and she's into some awesome stuff. She has a thread. Jared, did you see her thread on like human dynamics? And she was making, and maybe Aussie, you saw this too, because I think I shared it or retweeted, and I think one of you liked it. About comparison to human systems, and we mentioned a human-centered design and how that's gotta re-enter. Awesome stuff, check out her stuff, and then, of course, our gal, Allison and Dave says she agrees. Allison, which aspect are you talking about? You think capital's gonna flow back out? And then Aussie, you said you don't think they're going to I just balanced my banks.
Exactly. Exactly, Vicky.
Yeah, man. So, Vicky, are you spreading money back out? Are you keeping in crypto? Did you move money to crypto? Like some people did? And that's a question. Did you guys do any bank moves to the crypto bros? Did you do any
I didn't
moves?
because I'm in Canada, so I'm safe.
And Jared in Colombia, you were in the narco state. No, yeah.
No, no, I haven't, but watching because I was in Colombia when Signature and Silicon, went under, but it really inspired me to get my banking shit together there because
Okay.
I'm still not unconvinced that if Binance goes down, like, I mean, we're gonna get into some stuff today, but there's a lot of what ifs that are on the horizon.
Okay.
Vicky says, "I'm in Robinhood," which backs or,
Thanks.
banks with JP Morgan.
Yes.
Um, and so capital flows back out from crypto. I am gonna have to agree with Austin. If you just put
What?
money in Bitcoin and it goes from 20 to 27, that's cool, but if you take it out, you have short-term capital gains. So
That's interesting at
you
that
can
level.
you have a
Yeah.
taxable event and it's probably not worth it. And if you had the gumption to put it into crypto, especially into Bitcoin, you probably understand that it's a long-term hold and that if you want to make money in Bitcoin, unless you're a day trader, you have to at least wait 48 months. No one's lost any money in Bitcoin when they've waited 48 months. Stat.
So
And
you
but
think
wait,
these
wait.
people actually? Oh, go ahead.
Wait, I wanna
Go
finish,
ahead.
I wanna drop some other stuff, and then
Yeah,
Grant, I'm sure you're gonna go for 30
okay.
minutes.
No,
The other thing is, you said something about how, did the banks fail or was someone doing their job? And I think, like, the biggest problem we have here, and Anthony Pompliano called this out, he's like, "The Fed has basically taken 12 or 16 months where they basically got $1 trillion off the balance sheet because 'cause they're trying to just kill the economy because they're trying to basically kill inflation, right?" Um, and, uh, and then in days, seemingly days, they've put back on like $600 billion back onto the balance sheet. So it's like they worked almost like a year and a half to get all this money off the balance sheet, the federal balance sheet, and then in days they had to put it all back because they had to basically go backstop all these banks from
interesting.
busting. So it's like the system is broken, right? Like the banking system can like I guess I want to say that I don't think these things are mutually exclusive, right? The banking system can be broken and everyone can still get their money back. Because what we're doing is just putting more fiat money out into the system because we're just pressing a keystroke, right? And if we think of fiat money as a cryptocurrency, you're not buying it. You're never holding any of it because there's one node, is an unlimited supply, and that's the name of the game. And there's not even
Mm,
like a protocol time where it's like the halving, where it's like, oh, at this point, you're going to get more. At this point, it will be worth less. It's just like at any random time, all of a sudden the Fed's like, well, we have to backstop signature and
Have you
SVB. Let's just
guys
print money.
seen the Chat GPT definition of basically the US dollar as a cryptocurrency? Because if you haven't, you have to see it
Tell us,
because
tell
it
us,
is
tell us.
like
what do you mean? Be more specific. What do you mean?
someone asked Chat GPT to basically describe the US dollar
Okay.
as a cryptocurrency.
Okay.
See, and the thing is, this is the literal premise behind the Fiat Standard, which is a book I have over there from Saifedean Ammous, where he basically says, what if the US dollar were a cryptocurrency? Let's look at it as though it's a cryptocurrency. And the second you do that, you realize that it's not worth holding. It may not even be worth earning in at some point because it's just funny money. And it's basically, yeah, it's backed 100% by our confidence and our belief in it. And it doesn't actually exist. It's actually intangible, similar to Bitcoin. We don't actually, most of us don't touch money. If you're going to buy a home and you're buying it for quote cash, we still say cash. What we mean is I'm going to send you a wire transfer of the $800,000 you're asking for or whatever. And before I pass the mic, I want to call out Vicky. I love some of the comments she says. I'm worried about the on-off ramps for crypto, as am I, which is why I'm trying to get a bank account going in another country. I also use Coinbase, and I'm worried about that one, but I feel like it will live. I feel like Coinbase will live. They've always
Yes.
been
Yes.
very, very good with regulators. They've got big financial institution backing, which basically what I mean there is that they have like probably a fleet of lawyers to come in and smooth things over. So I'm not worried
Interesting.
about Coinbase. I am worried about Binance a little bit, just a
Only
little
because of the
bit.
heat they're under right now, which
A
is
lot of heat,
nuts.
a lot of heat, a lot of heat.
A lot of heat.
I mean,
Should I share should I share my screen with this PNG with the picture
Yes,
from
yes,
yeah,
ChatGPT?
by
yes.
all
Even if it's explicit.
well, yeah, so explicit warning, here we go. Let me see this.
Yeah.
So this is it gonna come in
Oh,
clear?
can
Is
you
it
zoom in?
I will zoom in. I've got to
You
so
gotta zoom in more. I don't know if I can.
Oh
Can you
my
read it?
gosh. Okay, I see what you're saying. So if the US dollar was a token, what are its tokenomics? And is it
Exactly.
viable or is it a rug?
so if anyone knows anything about a crypto project, this is some of this it reminds us we were talking about this. Do you guys remember Titano?
Yes. Yeah.
Titano. No, I don't know if I know that.
I remember Titano.
Titano was like the original rebase token
Yes.
Oh
of
god.
DeFi.
That's why I don't
And
know about it.
so yeah, basically the thing that followed Time Wonderland.
Yeah.
And it essentially reads almost as if it was Titano, especially its token supply. The USDC, funny that it calls it USDC, has
Yeah.
a flexible token supply controlled by a centralized entity known as the Federal Reserve.
Oh my gosh.
The
Okay, we have to admit to the viewers, like, time out. To many viewers, you will not understand the jokes underneath this thing, like if you've read a lot of tokenomics, maybe you're watching this and you understand tokenomics and how absolutely ridiculous that first sentence is, because the number one thing you look at when you look for token supplies, it's probably all fully minted and or in Bitcoin's case, maybe there's a limited minting, but there's a finite supply. And when you see this, this is the first red flag of many. So, is there a way you can take this PNG and post it in the comments on LinkedIn so that people can check that out? Maybe we'll do that after in the show notes or something like that. Because
Yeah,
I'd love to go through it because there's no staking rewards.
It's exactly what I mean, you could read Saifedean's book, or I guess you could read this PNG, but it's that exact idea. There's one node. The supply is unknown. You don't know when there's gonna be more out. Just imagine if you're in an NFT project, right? And you're in your 10,000, like, you buy a Bored Ape, right? And then 3 days later, Bored Ape is like, "Oh, we had some disaster. We had to mint 500 more."
Yeah.
It's like your Bored Ape is now worth less. And then
Yes.
that just happens on, like, a massive, 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 massive scale to
Yeah.
where you get to the United States to where it is today, where I think it's like what the GDP is, or the debt is 2.25 times greater than the GDP.
Oh, yeah.
And like
Oh, yeah.
I've just been reading stuff by Raoul Pal, who by the way is amazing, and Aussie, myself, and Allison are all part of the RV Collective. And he's just basically talking about that every 3.5 years, the governments around the world print more money just so they can start to pay off interest on their debt. And if you do that, you're never actually gonna ever pay off any principal. You're
Yeah.
barely gonna be making interest payments. So, um, we're really in a world of interesting things where I think the digital economy is gonna continue to move forward, which is why I also don't think people are taking their money out of crypto or Bitcoin and gonna put it back into banks. If you already have
Mm.
it in crypto, just leave it. You're gonna have to find some other money. Wait for your paycheck, wait for your payment, wait for your tenants to pay you from real estate or whatever. But I don't see people taking that money out. I don't think. And then the other side of me, let me just play Harvey Two Face here.
Harvey too. It's
Says
okay.
that Harvey Dent says that Bitcoin's gonna go under 20. Not because the people that just put money into it are gonna sell, but because other people who see it go up and they're like, "Oh, let me just get out now." And I don't know. I think there's still a lot of fear in the market, and I think people will have to sell not because they choose to sell, but because they're gonna feel like they need to sell. There's
Mm.
a lot of people getting laid off, especially if you're in the crypto industry right now. It is dark. There's an entire organization, which I don't really want to call it on the mic because I've known some people have gotten laid off, but they are getting laid off by the droves. And we're just
Interesting.
getting into a tough place economically. It's something I've actually been saying for a year, and Grant's been disagreeing with me, but
I am.
maybe,
A
and
and I
and
even
I stick
still
by it.
And I
And
even still yep, I even still like, I believe right now, most of the economic downturn, these are decoupled things. What is it called? There's a false logic that looks, and it's often attributed to conspiracy theories when you look at disparate things that are not technically connected, and then we connect them. I'm not saying that's where you're at. There is good, solid logics for this, but I myself, I believe that first and foremost, economics is not a hard science, it's a social science. And as a social science, it's first and foremost human and psychological. And so the more that we like right now, Silicon Valley Bank gets propped up. It's goofy. There's inflation. We got a ton of money on the books. It's nuts, right? Okay, agreed. However, we did avoid a major banking collapse. Psychologically, as a consumer confidence wise, we should go, well, there might still be some shakiness coming, but it wasn't the massive implosion that we were promised. And so let's give this a few more weeks to see how this is going to shake out. But generally speaking, it's not the massive implosion everyone has talked about. But if you read the headlines and accepted the headlines, we should absolutely be kissing our butts goodbye, buying bread with wheelbarrows full of cash, and the end is nigh. However, I just watched all of my gas drop by 50 cents here in town. It went from 359 to 301. And so you're going, what is really going on here? And so these things are disconnected. I agree. It's like, well, that's an interesting indicator, but like, is it as bad? And so, like, there's these layoffs. For example, we talked about Dapper Labs. They've gone through 3 rounds of layoffs. And my contact there, he said, well, we're not laying off because we don't have the revenue. We overhired in the first place. We shouldn't have hired in the first place. We were hiring for 18 months ahead of R&D and development. So we're just extending our runway. We're sitting on fine cash. The question is do we have 12 months of runway or 4 years of runway? And so when I look at a lot of the tech layoffs, I'm seeing something similar. So when I hold my position is I still have yet to see hard data that makes me think the world is ending, the sky is falling, so to speak. Go ahead,
I
Aussie.
I I don't think I'm between you 2. I don't think that the world's
Damn it,
ending,
Austin. Damn it. You have to
but
be
Pick a side.
yeah, pick a side,
the
buddy.
world's not ending.
Sure.
But there is hard economic times. Economic are not good. There's a reason why we are seeing layoffs in tech. I still stand my position that people aren't going to move their money out of crypto back into cash
I
if
do
they
agree with
move their
that.
money into crypto, because
Yeah.
the on ramps are freaking disappearing. On ramps and off ramps are disappearing. And so it doesn't matter if they're having a hard time, they'll they don't if they don't think they can get their money into crypto, they're not going to try to take any money out of crypto.
Let's
If
capture
they're
that real quick. I wanna unpack that real quick because Vicky said something very similar just moments ago. She's feeling the pressure of on-ramps and off-ramps. She said this, if I can find the comment, I'll bring it back up. But I'm now hearing this a lot, and I need more data on this. So I know that we feel like some of this is a directed attack on ramps and off ramps from a banking level. And now we got these SEC Wells notices going out. And that's scary. That caused Coinbase to do a pseudo threat to move offshore, which is like a real deal. But I will say I'll change my position on that because of what Jared said. If you have panic going on a Sunday night and everyone's moving their cash and they're going, "Where am I gonna go?" And it's flushed into crypto. I forgot, and Jerry, it was a good salient point that if you pull it out, that's now a taxable event. That's not a transfer. And I guarantee the CEO who moved 10 million of their Y Combinator money out was not thinking that. But now that the dust has settled, their legal team and their tax team are like, "Wait, do not move that back out yet. We really need to know what we're doing." And they did see a 10, 15, 20% bump literally within a week. So they went from 10 million to 20 million in Bitcoin. That's scary on its own because you want to secure profits. So it's an interesting concept. I would agree with that. But Austin, could you please unpack for me what on ramps are disappearing?
banks, the easy ACH transfer banks to Coinbase to crypto.com to everywhere else, those are slowly disappearing. Yes, I see Allison. Allison Banks. Yes, I play the middle ground. What do you want?
Yeah,
It
I'm so glad Alice said that because I'm like, Aussie, we come from a country where there's a civil war. You got to choose a side.
Yeah,
Could be
you
in
got to,
Kentucky. If you want to be Kentucky, that's cute.
and it could be
But
brother
like,
on brother violence. We don't even care. Like
yeah,
that,
yeah, it could be,
it's not
from the
healthy.
same NFT collective violence. But I want to call out Grant something that you said because I think it's a really important thing that when you think about it. Now, I don't think the world's ending. I just think the water's heating up. And we're just sitting there like, oh, it's not that bad. Oh, it could be worse. Well, the banking crisis didn't happen, so it could be worse. But I'm sitting here like, all we're doing is avoiding short-term uncomfort for long-term pain because we're just printing more money instead of letting banks fail and banks collapse. Wow, Aussie took that so personally. He left. He left. He
He
couldn't do it.
didn't. He
He
didn't.
couldn't choose a
He had
side.
to dip for a second.
Yeah,
There he
he
is.
couldn't choose a side. He had to go. But the thing I will say though is gas prices are no longer going to be a thing that I'll look at to kind of get an idea of where the economy is. And Raoul
Interesting.
Powell was talking about this the other day. He said, "Look, and I read the other day, Europe is after 2035, Europe is no longer allowing you to basically put out carbon emitting vehicles, which is a fancy way of them saying you can't use gas anymore, right? Um,
you
Now
can't
there
sell
are
gas cars.
you
You
can't sell
can't
gas
sell
cars after 2035. Now, there are arguments here that to make the batteries that you need in the back of these cars can potentially be just as horrible for the environment as all the years of
Of
gas. Like
course.
we know these things, right? But let's just
Yeah.
live in that world. Raoul Pal was saying, you know what? Gas is going to become so cheap as we move forward, as more and more people turn to alternative energies. And
Interesting.
homes have geothermal, and homes have even like the Tesla battery pack where you just have the solar from your roof getting this pack going and everything's electrified.
Mm.
And all of our appliance are fairly good at running on low amounts of energy. It's not
Yeah.
back in the day when you had a computer in the 60s or whatever that took up like an entire warehouse. So using, I think, gas and petroleum as a metric for like, is the economy okay? I think is going to be something. And I'm just calling it out now. I'm not sure if it's a pushback or rebuttal of what you've said, but I don't think it's going to be something we're going to be able to use as kind of a bellwether to be able to tell like where the economy is
I
locally or
would never
globally.
use that as a as a Canadian, I would never use that as a gauge of how good the economy is. I'm more interested in like I troll Reddit and like personal finance Reddits a bunch.
I would look
And
at gas. I would watch Reddit boards.
Yeah,
well, you know what?
I want to just encapsulate that.
Yeah.
Hey,
Keep going.
but
Keep
but the fact is I'm seeing more and more posts, especially in personal finance pages and stuff like that, of even Canadians, just Canadian ones saying, "Hey, I can't make my mortgage payment anymore," or or my mortgage payment is eating my life, and I'm struggling to pay all my bills and eat, and basically they're feeling the crunch of inflation, of interest rates, and even now I'm seeing more and more of like, I just got laid off,
Yeah.
or my
Yeah.
my work just did a temporary shutdown for 3 weeks or
Yeah.
something. And so I'm seeing more and more posts like that. 6 months ago, a year ago, wasn't really hearing that. That wasn't something that was like really coming up. But
Interesting.
that is now like every day, or if not every day, every other day, something along those lines are coming up. And
Mm.
to me, that is more resounding than, oh, the price of gas went up 50 cents or the price of gas dropped 50 cents. Because that's all controlled by supply, and whether OPEC is mm, respecting supply rules or whatever, or if people are buying gas, or if
Yeah.
it's the productive, like in Canada, if it's the productive season of oil and gas production or not. So
Mm. Yeah, I don't know, the reason I look at gas is not for macro cycles, but for local sentiment. And I'm looking for what is the sentiment here when people because people ignorant people look at gas price and say, "Look, inflation." But you just listed several other dials, supply and demand, supply chain. Like, I mean, there's a lot of things and just greed. Like, I know that, like, when we have hurricanes here in Florida, I mean, you'll watch price gouging go on, and we had to enact price gouging laws. And so, like, a lot of things touch on it, but why don't we say the same thing about eggs or milk? We look at egg price and we
supply
go,
management, supply management in Canada,
well, there it
milk and eggs, cheese to a certain extent,
yeah.
all control. You guys got $5 eggs. I'm paying like $3 Canadian for eggs,
Well, but
and that doesn't change.
and here's my point though, like people pick and choose their basket of goods that they think are indicators of are we in inflation or what people are thinking. But I agree with you. It's not like a macro indicator of how strong the market is, how strong the economy is. There are obviously other numbers, but for me, I pay attention to the social side. I'm really curious about how humans are reacting. Are they filling their tanks? Are they crowded there? In Florida, did they clear the shelves of water and toilet paper? Like I always look for those sorts of things because to me, what I'm looking for is the crazy factor. Hold on real quick. So Allison says, "Grant, what's Vicky's Twitter?" And that's mainly because we have never had someone who seems like they touch on so many awesome topics. Vicky knows about Robinhood. She knows about natural gas prices dropping like a stone. So she's you can follow her by checking out my followers on Twitter. Her Twitter handle is at Drapetta. I'll put it in the comments in just a quick second. And then she knows about the price of eggs in Vermont.
Is
So
Vicky out of Vermont?
I think
Damn.
so. I think Vicky's out of Vermont.
Vicky, we'll
Okay.
have to link. I go to Stowe a lot, so
I think
I'm
it
not that far from Vermont either, so
you're
it's
yeah.
not invited. You're not invited till you choose a team.
fuck
I
no.
Aussie's
it's
just gonna show up waving the Canadian flag.
I get some love from Allison, but I do trust Aussie, your indicators for the strength of an economy and its strength of its dollar and the strength of its imports and exports. I do think like that those are better indicators of economic strength. But I'm always looking out for what to me is a insidious but yet more powerful thing, and that's the crazy of the masses. when the masses start getting nutso, like where are they moving their money and what are they doing and how are they panicking and what are they hyping? That's what that's always what I'm looking out for. Um, from that side. So I like this. I like this narrative that like taxable events are going to keep money in crypto. Like that's going to be interesting. And as they have to make payroll, they might sell chunks. But you're right, it might not be a capital flight. So I've changed my opinion on that. That's a really strong argument.
It's funny
Burlington.
though, Grant, your argument, you running through me talking about my argument has made me take your position, which is like in the event that you had 20 million, right?
Yeah,
You
yeah,
take it out of Signature and SVB overnight and you
yeah,
dump it into Bitcoin. If you did
yeah,
that on that Friday,
yeah,
you got Bitcoin at 19.5. And I know because I bought a lot of Bitcoin on at 19.5 on that Friday. And so then, okay, so let's live in that world. You've done this, right?
yeah,
Then
yeah,
Bitcoin goes up to 28,000,
yeah,
right? You could still and you had 20, so, 28, 20, you got what, 35%? You've just increased? You
yeah,
could totally still pay short-term capital gains, and you just made a couple milli for nothing.
yeah,
So, maybe we will see flight, but it's exactly what you said. The CPA sitting down and saying like, "Hey, whoa, 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 whoa.
yeah,
We can't sell easily. Let's look at what we're gonna do." And I think there's still money to be had there, even if you're paying 30 or 40% capital gains, depending on where you are and what your legal structure is. If you can make a couple milli and then just put that money back in a bank with cash, and you've also, this is the most important thing, you've also seen that, yes, this bank went down, doesn't really matter which bank. The FDIC came out and basically just said, we have to cover this, right? Like not just
yeah,
the FDIC, basically said, we have to cover this.
yeah,
So you've now made a couple $1,000,000. It's been a rocky ass month. You
yeah,
didn't make payroll 1 week, but everything's the same. And it like if you woke up from a coma 28 days later, your company now has more money.
yeah,
You missed one day for payroll,
yeah,
and that's it.
yeah, yeah,
And as we've talked about, you've avoided a banking crisis. Now, I think it's short-term discomfort,
yeah, yeah.
pushing a short-term cover for a more long-term pain. But we'll see. And here's actually okay, so here's the
Interesting.
question I have,
Yeah.
I've been dying to, like, talk about this about Silicon Valley. So, the thing with Silicon Valley, and I believe the same thing happened with Signature, is during the pandemic, right, we were at 0% interest. And the government starts printing all this money. So then all these people start having more money. Individuals, companies, everyone just started making more money, right? You really couldn't pick a bad stock on Robinhood in October, November of 2020 because everything was just flying up, right?
Okay.
And so then the banks are starting to get all this cash, right? People are starting to have more cash. And I'm seeing all these comments, and I'll get to the comments in a sec.
Yeah.
So now you have all this cash, right? The bank gets all this cash. What does the bank want to do? They want to do something conservative. Okay. So then they're going to go out and they're going to they bought treasuries, they bought bonds. Okay.
Yeah.
The bonds were giving 1.5%. That's not a lot, but in a 0% interest environment, that's awesome.
Yeah.
We're doing really great. And for anyone who already knows this story, because you've read about it, I'm sorry. I have to build this up. So then so then, uh, the Fed over the next 16 months starts to crank, right? And they
Yeah.
get interest rates up to where we are today at 5%.
Yeah.
Now that 1.5% is at a loss. So then when
Yes.
people came to the banks and they say, "Hey, we want our money out," Signature, I think Silicon Valley had to sell a bunch of bonds at a loss. They were
Yes.
holding realized losses, and they didn't
Yeah.
want to obviously realize them. Unrealized losses, excuse me. They didn't
Correct.
want to
Yeah. Yeah.
realize them. Now, the question I have, and this is where I get really interesting as a Bitcoin maxer, someone thinks that there's going to be trillions of dollars going into Bitcoin. Why? If we go to another 0% environment, which maybe we go to in the future, maybe there's another pandemic, maybe there's some climate catastrophe that we just can't foresee. Okay. 10 years out, we go to another zero interest setting. Everyone is once again flush with cash.
Yeah.
The banks this time are not going to buy bonds because they saw what happened when that happened in 2021 and 2022. And when banks in the United States are not incentivized due to something they've already seen, potentially trauma, of it not working a decade before, what are they going to buy? What are they going to put their wealth into to get a little bit of money back? Because banks want to be conservative, right? They didn't get crazy. The banks didn't go out and buy NFTs, right? They weren't buying Bored Ape Yacht Clubs. They were buying
Crypto punks.
government crypto bucks. They were buying government treasuries. They weren't in Wonderland. Hashtag Grant. They were buying treasuries and bonds. They weren't in degen DeFi shit. They weren't flipping through pancake swap. My point is, where will they go? We've
Are you
seen that you
Are
cannot
you
go into treasuries
arguing
and
for
bonds.
Bitcoin right now? I
It's not
don't
even
think
Bitcoin. It's not even Bitcoin. It could be real estate. I'm just saying, I don't think it's gonna be my point is, I don't think it's gonna be government sanctioned and co-signed investment products.
I
And
agree with
if
that.
it's
Yeah,
not,
I agree with that.
where's it gonna
I was thought
go?
you were going where they're
No,
going to Bitcoin, and I was
no, no,
gonna
no,
be
no.
like,
I don't
I'm
think
gonna
they're going
take
to
a
I
side
think
here, and I'm not a Bitcoin maxi,
no,
and
I think
that's
some
not
will go to Bitcoin,
I
but
think
my
so.
point is that's a larger problem for the United States moving forward because they rely on a lot of the banks holding these things. They'll rely on institutions and even pension funds and individuals, wealthy individuals buying these things because they think it's conservative and it's going to be a good thing long term. But we've just seen if you buy a government treasury that's supposed to be there for 30 years, it may not even last 24 months. So that's all.
Mm.
Mhm.
That to me
I
is a huge crack in the entire system. And I was thinking about it the other day and I was like, I've not heard people talk about this, even though it must be on everyone's mind.
Well, first off, if I had a response here, and I do want to call out a few comments. Vicky says, I feel like people, even Bitcoiners, are either in or out, just waiting for a pullback to reinvest. I agree with that. I think she mentions Forgiven. I think she was talking about some of the negative treasury bonds and stuff. Maybe that's what was going on there. But she
Mhm.
does say possibly municipal bonds. I think I was going to make 2 points there. Number one, I think we have a very short memory span. I'm going to shock everyone. The famous person that is Kim Kardashian has a sex tape out that shows her being absolutely doing her thing, right? We have a very short memory of where people came from, and we don't hold it over them, especially when it comes to a come up, because we wanna come up too, and we'll turn a blind eye. We made a lot of the same mistakes this time that we did in 2008. In fact, the protections and there was a series of people think I'm being political when I mention that Trump signed that bill that kind of removed the protections of the Glass-Steagall Act. But there was a whole series of other regulators who, between that moment and now, could have reinstituted it. My point is that was only 12 years ago, and we have a very short memory. So I think that they'll say we have protections in place, and we'll have similar instruments. But to Vicky's point, I believe there are enough other instruments. Like, for example, a major area of our economy that is still lacking, and why I'm shocked the prices haven't tanked way more, and that's housing prices. Like, if we've been talking about a recession as strongly as we've been talking about it, we hold several properties, and I would have seen the prices on those go way down. But in fact, I've seen the opposite. I've seen the prices on my properties go up in the last 6 weeks. I monitor it every week. I pull my estimates and my appraisals and stuff every week. I'm sorry, every few weeks. And I've now gone back up 5% in the last 6 weeks, and I'm going, "Whoa, okay." So, I think that in the terms of real estate, if we're looking for conservative investments in so many years, 10 years, we'll say when there's a new set of decision makers and all the young pups are now in charge and they forget, all this stuff. I don't think it's a major chink in the armor. I think we'll have the current existing variety, but I do think then we'll have also this, I followed you. I was like, he's channeling Raoul Paul about Bitcoin right now. He's about to drop it, but he didn't. That's okay. But here's what I do think will happen. I think the idea of tokenization and DeFi overlapping TradFi and vice versa, I believe in that 10-year time span, that will normalize. And there will be a whole new set of instruments that well, we'll realize that tokenization isn't a risk factor. That's actually, if anything, a decentralization factor, which in a lot of ways, in some ways, limits risk. And so I think you might see, especially the tokenization of real estate and a variety of like what looks like REITs, but in the DeFi world, I think there will be a lot more options for institutional investors to choose from. So I don't see it as a big gap. It's a good conversation point, but I don't see it as a big gap. I don't know. What about you, Aussie?
I I do think there's a big gap, and I don't know. I think what Sean's saying great here. Shout out to Sean. He's also a YouTuber, great content
Mm,
on his channel. But I totally agree. Banks are slow to change, so I don't. I think that at least some of them will still go back to going to treasury bonds. Um, if you think about it, Silicon Valley, you had 3 banks fail, and I'm gonna argue that maybe it was 2 banks fail. You've got
I'm thinking the same way. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm
like
thinking the same
Signature
way
didn't
also.
really fail. Signature was just New Yorked. Um,
New
so
York. Did you just verb New York's
yeah,
policy? Okay.
was just New Yorked, and so you've got 2 banks that failed because of a whole slew of other events, including funding from a U.S. senator that all contributed to kind of to that decline. And so most of them will say it's not bonds' fault. It's not treasury bonds. It was, especially with all the narrative that's going on, it was this bank was poorly managed. Um, they were into crypto. Crypto was bad back then. Um, and so
Yeah.
that's where
Yeah.
I think
Scapegoat.
Sean's right on the point. I don't, especially with the Fed backstopping these small regional banks that are at risk of failing. I think that's not what we're gonna see. We're not gonna see a change. Um,
And I think Vicky really calls this out, and I wanna shout to this. This is to me what I love about economics, small business is the social side, as I said, and incentives is like a very economic way to say greed, right? Like, what are the incentives here? And when you talk about treasury bonds and you look at the tools available to the Federal Reserve to actually function, is the Federal Reserve going anywhere anytime soon? No. It's insanity that they're increasing rates, which is supposed to what? Limit money supply, but we keep the back door open by pumping money supply. I said this the other day, and it's like people don't get like, well, why is inflation still out of control? Why are prices still high? And it's like, well, I mean, you got to do all the tools, you know, to limit money supply and to hopefully decrease circulation and decrease prices. But incentives is the right word here, and I think that as so long as the Fed is incentivized, meaning to stay in existence, it's going to keep playing the game with treasury bonds. And government's gonna keep being incentivized going, well, we can't do a lot here. We gotta, they're just gonna return to the same old thing. I think it's up to the people to re-centralize how we're allocating our resources. The reason I love the capital flight from SBB, SVB, sorry, the SVB thing is to me, I think it sent a huge message. In fact, I think the story that is not being told is how freaked out the banking institutions, the banking cartel, and I would include the Federal Reserve in this, as well as the large institutions and the lobbyists, how absolutely petrified they are right now at how easy it was to protect capital by moving it into crypto. Like, I think there is a story under the hood, and I think that they're perpetuating the bank crash conversation in headlines because they're trying to buy themselves time to figure out their response. They're using SEC Wells notices. They're using fear tactics. Do you guys follow the Concordia Bank thing? Did I tag you in that? The
I don't
Concordia
think you
Bank.
tagged me in that, but it follows the whole choke point 2.0 narrative of trying to shut things down, try to limit access, to limit bank runs. Because
Yeah.
I do agree that there was capital flight to crypto. As a crypto maxi, there was capital flight to crypto.
Crypto
We
maxi.
saw that would happen.
That's cute, Aussie.
Ha
He
ha ha.
he picked a side. He picked crypto. He picked
He
DeFi.
did. He just chose crypto.
But they also it was also a flight from regional banks to major banks. And so and
Interesting.
also a flight to cash. Depending on who you were, there was
Interesting.
a flight to cash, there was a flight from regional banks to central bank to bigger major banks.
You can call
And
them
yes,
central
there was a
banks. I
flight
think that's fine.
central banks, and there
Central
was a
banks.
flight to crypto.
Yeah.
But I don't think we the flight to crypto is the only thing that is freaking them out. They're freaked
Mhm.
out about how much their whole system and how quickly a bank can go from being completely liquid to being deeply in trouble. And that's what's more scary to them than necessarily everything having to do with crypto. I think crypto is freaking them the hell out. And that's why we're seeing Gary be Gary
Yeah.
and with his sick up his butt.
Gary
And
be Gary. That sounds like a new Netflix show.
I was thinking that. So then let's
honestly, it's
let
a
this
meme. Gary's my meme.
so
If you
let's
see me on any other show, all I talk about is Gary.
oh my
And
gosh, your buddy. So let's then pivot this conversation because this is the Not Crypto Bro show, not necessarily the economy show, though it's become that in the last few episodes, which I enjoy personally. But let's talk about the rise of flat coins. And so because this I think is another fact that I think would freak out the financial elite and the institutional elite from a flat coin perspective. So, teeing this up real quick for you, Aussie, you just did this on the show recently. Jared, I don't know how informed you are on this. Coinbase announced on its tool Base, it encouraged people to build what they called flat coins. I'm sure they didn't invent the term, but the term's probably been floating around, but it's the first time I had heard of it. And this is in contrast to a stable coin. A stable coin is pegged to the US dollar. Now, we all know the inherent goofiness of that is that as inflation goes up and purchasing power goes down, you are basically corroding your money. So you've moved your money into crypto for all the boons, except it's still corroding at the rate of inflation. So now we're calling for flat coins, or now
Mhm.
Coinbase is calling for flat coins, and flat coins are what, Aussie?
altcoins are basically stable coins that track inflation. So, um, essentially, let's say inflation is 3% this month. Well, instead of the USDC or USDT staying at $1, it is now $1.03 because because inflation has gone up 3%. And so they're talking about doing this by following CPI. So CPI last month was about 0.4. And so you would see a flat coin go from $1 to $1.004. So a fourth of a cent, which would basically ensure that purchasing power stays the same. Um, so
Yeah. Yeah.
uh, instead of, all of our parents and grandparents talking about how, oh, eggs were 25 cents when I was a kid. Well, purchasing power of 25 cents is very different now than it was then. And
Hmm.
essentially we could have the conversation that, yeah, eggs are $5 now. Eggs in 10 years will be equal to 5 of these flat coins still.
Interesting. Justin Tate, who is Maverick, says kind of like Frax's FPI. I'm not familiar with Frax's FPI. Do you guys have any knowns about this?
I
Justin,
didn't know.
Justin, please drop a link. We would love to look at that. Vicky asks, flat coins equals money market. Are you saying that because money market is a safer investment? Because I don't view that money markets basically don't just track the inflation rate or purchasing power, as it were. It actually adds it in. So it grows along. It basically takes what was originally pegged to whatever dollars you put in but rises as inflation rises, as Aussie was describing it a second ago. I think this is a powerful tool. Jared, how do you think this will impact? Like, how will regulators react? Will this heat them up and push them over the edge? Or will they just treat it like anything else and disregard it because they don't know what they're talking about?
I just don't know how it works. Like, I don't actually get the mechanics of it. Like, I think we've all seen that even stable coins cannot work, right? If they're algorithmically pegged, even if they're not. If you have $3.5 billion of cash in Silicon Valley Bank, and that's 10% of what you need to back your stable coin, and then
Yeah,
that bank goes under, gets in trouble, and then you see that was when we saw USDC drop 10% because 10% of what was backing it was now in question.
that's a good point.
So I don't actually understand how it works. Like I get in theory how it works. Like, okay, I buy a dollar, I buy a stable coin, right? It all starts at with one, right? And then next year they say the CPI is 6%. So now each one's worth 1.06. Where
Yeah.
did that 0.06 come from?
Yeah, like,
right?
was there an increase in reserves,
Yeah, and if
you
there was,
know?
then they're just printing money on the back end, which doesn't really, like, solve the problem, I guess. Then they're just like there there needs to what the way I understand, there needs to be external manipulation of the value, which I don't really think actually solves anything. So I'm just kind of interested in how they work. Like, I like how they work
Well,
in
it solves
theory.
something. It just doesn't solve something that I think you like. You don't like an external manipulation of a currency, which is why you like the idea of Bitcoin. But it does solve for purchasing power in theory.
In
But
theory, it's all for purchasing power, but
uh,
I think I like Austin's example. I really like it with the eggs. It's like you need these 3 flat coins to get eggs today. In
mhm,
20 years, you can still use 3 flat coins and you'll get 12 eggs. That to
mhm.
me makes sense. But then I think we're just getting into a place where you have like coupons. Like I have my milk coupon and I have my egg coupon because being able to track that across different products as they go up and down, I think is really, really difficult. And this is obviously the crux of like why money's so interesting and why currency is so interesting. When you go to some countries, you're rich, and other countries, you're maybe not as well off. Um, I guess I just don't see how it works. Like, who's creating that extra little amount, and what are they using to decide upon what is the actual inflation? Because I think the three of us and many people listening will agree that like the CPI is a metric. Do I hold it to be true? Absolutely not.
Agreed.
Right? When I see rents going up 15%, 20%, when I see, gas it's sometimes going up, when I see food going up, my food basket, when I see, if I'm trying to fly, that goes up
Mm,
way higher than what CPI is, right?
yeah,
So
yeah.
I
That
I
is
I, I
interesting.
guess it's yeah. Sorry, there's two things. What are we using to measure, inflation and or loss of purchasing power? What is
Yeah.
that thing? And then how is that reflected in the flat coin in a way that, like, is allowing us to believe that it's not tampered with from the outside? Because not just Bitcoin, if Raoul Pal were saying what I was saying, he would say Ethereum because he finds Ethereum to be more deflationary and has a much
Yes.
higher utility.
Yes.
So, whether it's Ethereum or Bitcoin, how is this, this seems
Well
just uber centralized. I guess that's another thing I'll
well,
say.
what it does psychologically, though, is it does what stable coins felt like they should do.
Sure.
It felt like you got a stable coin and just the naming of it says, now this is stable. And I don't care what other things do. This is stable. The downside is that it was pegged, and the algorithmic pegging to the US dollar was a difficult run because like every second that trades were happening on Tether or DAI, like it had to match the purchasing power that minute to like the 10,000th cent, and that's some real active math going on. But when you have a stable coin, you might, or I'm sorry, a flat coin, doing what feels like stable coins promise, they're providing us the stability we wish the US dollar had, but is quickly losing. I think if we started actually using flat coins, regardless of backing, regardless of reserves,
Sure.
I think that you'd see a quick corrosion of faith in the dollar because you're keeping ahead of of CPI. Literally, if it was just loose enough that once a week, whenever the CPI numbers came out, it adjusted. That's it. That's as simple as the algorithm is. When the CPI numbers came out, it adjusted its purchasing power. And it's like, dang. I hear your point, Jarrett. Like, well, wait, if I took a Bitcoin right now, I could, in theory, through a series of grueling steps, pay for a gallon of milk, right? And
Grueling steps.
I mean, it would take me some steps, but I could, in theory,
Sure.
buy goods and services. If you had this flat coin, there's going to be additional steps, and then it does raise the question of, well, who is managing the protocol in such a way that I go out and actually buy a gallon of milk, which even though I circumvented the US dollar, I entered in the United States, I bought a gallon of milk. That value has now crossed from crypto into the US dollar system. And so there's still a crossing of the threshold that you do have. And when that happens, you have to reconcile the book somehow and go, where did that value come from? And so it's a valid question.
Well, so Justin, I was looking briefly at what Justin Tate sent us in chat about the
Thank you, Justin.
Frax price index, which is essentially just uh, basically it's following CPI
Mhm.
as its peg,
Interesting.
and it uses the unadjusted CPIU unadjusted 12-month inflation rate, which is published by the US federal government every month
Interesting.
using a chain like Oracle, which is a way
Interesting.
where you would never really need, once it's programmed, you don't really need outside input because
Yeah.
it's published on the same website at a consistent time every 30 days.
Yeah. Interesting.
So that's really interesting. I haven't gone to exactly how the stability and backing mechanism works, but I
Mhm.
know that Frax is backed by a basket of goods. So not just US dollars, but I think Bitcoin and ETH are also part of its backing.
Interesting.
I don't know the exact backing of it. I really should look more at Frax than I have.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
and so
That's interesting. Jarrett, you had a thought there before we pivoted real quick to talk about Frax. What was your thinking there?
Yeah, my thought, and I'm looking for it in my phone. There's the classic cryptocurrency triangle, and I believe, and I should know. Oh, thank God, I found it. Scalability, security, and decentralization. That those are the corners of a triangle, and you can pick two of them, but you can't have all three. And so when I think about this idea,
Interesting.
um, I think the decentralization is exceedingly low, but it would need to be able to be scalable, and it would need to be able to be secure. And one of the things that I would throw on top as people are thinking about the flat coin is exactly what you said, Grant. There's a moment in the transaction where a lot is going to have to happen because say I'm buying my gallon of milk at the store for one flat coin because it's always worth one flat coin, whether now or in
Mhm.
10 years.
Mhm.
Well, if I give it to the store and then the store goes and buys a gallon of milk from their vendor and so on and so forth, right? It goes throughout the value chain in 10 years, that same flat coin will have been beaten to a pulp on some level because there's got to be transaction fees, right? There has to be transaction fees on the network, even if they're minuscule. And if we're just talking about inflation and we're not in a hyperinflation, even if it's 1 or 2% a month, the transaction fee could be way less than 1%. But on some level, the transaction fee to keep the network secure, because I'm sure it's proof of stake, must be, um, you know,
I
it's
got
got to
you.
be, it's not zero.
I got you, bro. You're already dealing in arbitrage against the US dollar, right? So if CPI that year is 6.5%, you just say, listen, you publish their number on the Oracle and say at all times, we'll do CPI minus a quarter percent for all transactions. So the value of the peg is always 25% less than CPI that year. And that spread is just, listen, look at my purchasing power. Just by holding
Yeah.
this thing, I it's not a drip, it's not a return. It's and in fact, the SEC is gonna have a huge problem with this because they're gonna try to claim returns on this. And it's like, no, or it's gonna be a taxable event. It's really not because I didn't get earnings. I just wasn't a victim of inflation this year.
Or yeah, of losing purchasing power. It's
Yeah.
exactly that, and I love that Vicky wanna call this out. It's like
Yes.
forever stamps. That is the best analogy because if you have a stamp in 10 years in theory, you could go to the post office and mail it. Maybe it's 90 cents to send a post, to send post in the United States, but it doesn't matter because you bought those stamps and they hold value.
And then she
Um,
applies this to the Amazon use case. If Amazon just said, "Forget it, I'm gonna do this forever stamp concept," she's right. They turn into the biggest bank in the world. They do it against a basket of their own goods and raw materials that they have. And then the Amazon Flatcoin. So you can see how her ideation kind of flowers pretty quickly. Uh, just going, here's a use case. Go ahead, Jaossi. What's your thought there?
well, I was thinking you would never actually have to go to US dollars ever if you could pay your vendors in Flatcoin. You could
Mm,
Your vendors could then pay their suppliers in Flatcoin. If
mhm.
everything moved away from the US dollar to Flatcoin,
Yeah. They're
US you would never have to actually return those flat coins to US dollars ever. And
true. Yeah, like the incentive, like what's the incentive for the guy selling the bucket of milk? And he gets this flat coin, but he's used to doing currency in US dollars. So he's got this flat coin and then a bunch of US dollars. And it's like, well, which one of these is worth less? Well, technically the US dollars are worth less, but there's no velocity for me. There's no liquidity for me. So I'm going to go with that, which I have liquidity. What will
mm,
move around? I can't now turn around and pay my truck delivery in Flatcoin at a 6% bump because I'm doing better than but he quickly will hit that dilemma and ask himself, how do I transact everything in Flatcoin? You know?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. And the reason why I see flat coins, he he did say that, but he didn't say that. That's not he talked about a digital dollar.
Oh,
So
he was talking about the CBDC.
yeah, he's talking about digital dollars, and CBDCs. So calling that a dual currency system was at
It's
least
an
the
inroad.
last time.
It's
Yeah,
an
the last
inroad.
time. I'm not a big fan of CBDCs, but we're not going to go there right now. Um, I think
Why don't you tell us why you're not into CBDCs, Ron DeSantis?
no. Oh God. I am oh god. See,
Do you have like
so
a
CBDCs
summary?
have printing problems, they have tracking problems, they have limitation problems, they've got centralization problems, they've got basically they're the US dollar. They're literally that chat GPT explanation plus surveillance, tracking, potential limiting, restrictions,
Yeah.
um, zone limiting, all of that. So
So,
I'm
so
not
no,
going.
honestly, I think Grant and I agree with you on all
Oh,
those
yeah.
points philosophically. So one of the things I actually wanted to drop on this conversation because we're talking about flat coins, we're talking about the Fed, we've been talking about
Yeah.
the global economy as well as the U.S. economy as kind of a
Yeah.
bellwether for the global economy because the
Sure.
Fed prints money. Um, is this new thing which I had not heard of, but now I'm like, this is scary. Um,
Hmm.
have you guys heard about Fed Now?
No.
So
Are you making this up? Is this lizard
I
people?
I literally wish I was making this up because it's scary, but FedNow is gonna be a service that's gonna be apparently launched this July, which is gonna allow for there to be for the banking system essentially to be open 24/7, 365. Because as it is right now, we have to wait
No.
till Monday morning for settlements and, like, the world to end. But basically, the Fed realizes the world moves at a much quicker rate and you can't take off, weekends, and Vicky says FedNow is scary. I agree too, but maybe for different reasons. The beauty of cryptocurrency is that it's open all the time. It's a global thing. I can go anywhere in the world, and that is something we could have in common. You know, it's not like, well, you can't own Amazon stock because you're from this country, right? You just literally hard for you to get. Um, Fed now is going to allow banks to have settlement on the weekends and just move at a much quicker rate. And when I heard this being spoken about in a podcast with Anthony Pompliano and Caitlin Long, who is the CEO and founder of Custodia Bank, which I absolutely think I'm
I was
probably
gonna
going to put
open that
even
up
just
earlier. Love that.
$1,000 in there just from like a philosophical, and I want to support that.
Yeah.
Um, she was like, "Look, if this thing had happened with Fed Now out, then that Saturday and Sunday when everything kind of calmed down and the Fed was able to basically get together and, there was a bunch of meetings in Washington essentially where they came together and they had a Sunday meeting, essentially like a bailout meeting. If that had happened, that both of those banks could have been kaputs and other banks could have gone that Saturday and Sunday. But
Like
because
First
things
Republics.
yeah, but because exactly, but because things slow down on the weekends, you know, we're entering a
Oh,
world that we've
interesting.
never been in, and the Fed Now system is gonna be a very interesting system because it's gonna allow TradFi people to live more of a crypto calendar, and I don't think everyone's ready for a crypto calendar. So,
No.
I just wanted to throw that out there. We could talk about this on another episode because it's absolutely fascinating, and the implications of this, I need to learn more about it, but just to think that, like, TradFi exists on the weekends is a new idea, and when you're sitting at home on Saturday and you want to do some trading or you want to, move your money around and now you can at big levels, that is going to have some repercussions. It's going to, there's going to be a
Absolutely.
maturity moment.
Yeah. I know that he'd been talking and rumoring about this kind of service of being able to move money much more quickly through the Federal Reserve System.
Yeah.
But I didn't know that they had announced FedNow yet. And that's major, like, how did I miss this kind of
It should
moment?
be coming out in July. And I've also heard rumors that the CBDC will be launched in July. So as Vicky says, it is a step away from CBDC because
So
once you have something on
CBDCs are not
chain,
July. We've had this argument. You guys told me that 6 months was too far, and CBDCs are farther. He has said that. He has said
We did
CBDCs
say
are
that.
farther, but he did say that instantaneous transactions were very soon. and
Is
we're
it
Which is
very
built
fed
on
close
now.
this?
away,
Which is fed now.
which is
Is it
fed
built
now.
on the same rails?
I'm not sure what it's built on.
No
We
clue.
should look into it and next episode come back and brain
Yeah,
dump.
totally, because the opportunist in me, the humanitarian in me is like, "Oh, man, shucks." The opportunist in me is like, "What is the architecture they're building that on? Is it ISO 20022? Like, what are we talking about here, and what can I invest in to capitalize on this? Because this is happening regardless." All right, shout outs. Aussie, do you have shout outs for us today, brother?
Okay, I want to shout out Sean, Sean Clark from Good Day Crypto. Oh my God, thank you for tuning in. Thanks for retweeting us and tweeting about us, and
Yeah,
thanks for tuning in and joining in the conversation with some of that
big
awesome
time.
stuff. I think an invitation maybe up to the stage
Yeah.
might be in the future, because I think that you had some really great insights during this conversation.
Yeah.
And so big shout out to you.
I'll shout out Vicky and all of our commenters, but Vicky was really involved and she seems super informed and super creative. And she's also been on our Twitter feeds now. She has what looks like a relatively new Twitter account there, but she's really involved. She's got really intelligent threads. Check her out. A shout out to them and shout out to you guys. You guys brought the heat today on some really intellectual stuff, stuff for me to think on. So, and you made me change my opinion openly in front of everybody. So that's a big one. That's a big one. What do you got, Jarrett?
Can you go ahead, before I give my shout out and throw our handles back up from Twitter? I think I posted them for More
Yeah.
Than Blockchain on YouTube. Just so that way if people want to come and find us, that'd be great. Sean, I already see that we've connected on Twitter. I'm about to tweet at you. So yeah, thanks for everyone for hopping on. I guess my shout out is for Jay. Jay is still not back
Oh,
yet. He's
yeah.
still swamped by work.
Yeah.
I've been texting with him a little bit. I think he's been hopping in the chat with us a little bit. He should be back in April. And my shout out is for Jay and Brian Naughton. Brian Naughton will be joining us next
Yes.
week. And he's got a couple things I think he wants us to discuss briefly.
Yeah.
So that's going to be really exciting. So we'll see everyone
Super
next
smart
week,
guy.
Tuesday, 3:30 p.m. Eastern time. Follow us. Well, you can follow us. We're all on Twitter, and you can follow us if you want to get in touch with us specifically through Not Crypto Bros. Find us on LinkedIn and Twitter.
Yeah.
The videos have been going live on all three of our YouTubes, which is kind of great. So we get more kind of expanse out into the YouTubeosphere. So find us there, and we will see everyone next week.
Thanks so much. Have a great one, everybody.